Geometry, lesson set 36, angles greater than 360, sums of trig functions, which should be easy because it's just this chart, which we have memorized. But you do have to remember what quadrant you're in and therefore what your sign's going to be. And then finally, bow in the river problems, but I'm going to do that in a second video because those are very difficult. Okay, now, angles greater than 360. For instance, let's start with this. Negative 770. All right, positive angles, this is not a positive angle, but positive angles, usually we start from here and go counterclockwise around to figure out where we end up. For negative angles, we start here and go clockwise. That's a negative angle, okay? And this one happens to be more than 360, which means we're going around the circle at least once. So let's add 360, add 360 degrees. That puts us at negative 410 degrees. All right? Well, negative 410 is still 360 plus a little bit more. So I'm going to add another 360, and that's going to give me negative 50 degrees. That's really the angle we're going to look for. So again, negative 770 means we go around the circle this way once, counterclockwise, twice, for a total of 720, and then 50 more degrees, which puts us about here. These 360s just means we go around the circle twice, but we still end up here, okay? And this is 50 degrees by 40 degrees. Okay, that's it. So when you have negative 770, you add 720, because that's two full circles around, you end up with negative 50 degrees. There it is, negative 50 degrees. Your adjacent is going to be a positive number. Your opposite is going to be a negative number because you're going down. And the hypotenuse is always positive, okay? Always positive. Okay, now, let me erase this. Now let's add up these. Cosine 135 plus tangent of 330. First of all, we have to do a quick graph for each one. Cosine of 135 puts us at 90, 45 more degrees. So this will be a 45, 45, 90 triangle, which means the cosine of 135, okay, this is a negative number, this is a positive number, this is a positive number. The cosine of 135 is the same as the cosine of 45, right? Because this is 45 degrees right here. So the cosine of 45 is radical 2 over 2, which is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So a negative over a positive, right? Cosine of 135 is going to be a negative number adjacent over a positive number hypotenuse, which means that it must be negative radical 2 over 2. The cosine of 135 is negative radical 2 over 2. Now the tangent of 330, we do another quick graph. 330 means, we got to 270, 60 more. That means that this is 30 degrees here. So it's a 30, 60, 90 triangle. They want the tangent of 330. Well, that's the tangent of 30 degrees. Tangent of 30 is radical 3 over 3. Tangent of 30, well, 330, sorry, is going to be, tangent is opposite, which is a negative number, over adjacent, which is a positive number. Which means, again, that my answer will end up being a negative number, okay? So the tangent of 30 is radical 3 over 3. That means that this must be, since it's in the fourth quadrant, negative radical 3 over 3. And now they want to add these two together. So negative radical 2 over 2, minus radical 3 over 3. We need a common denominator of 6. So multiply this one by 3 over 3. Multiply this one by 2 over 2. So you get negative 3 radical 2 over 6. Negative 3 radical 2 over 6 minus 2 radical 3 over 6. Okay, so you have to watch your signs. Depending on what quadrant you're in, you just have to do a quick mental calculation. Remember, the hypotenuse is always positive. I have here the unit circle, but just forget about the 1 for now. Opposite positive, adjacent positive in the first quadrant, plus plus. In the second quadrant, opposite positive, adjacent negative. So negative x values, positive y values. The hypotenuse is always positive. Third quadrant, negative x values, negative y values, and this is always going to be positive, the hypotenuse. So that's going to be a negative negative. Here, fourth quadrant, positive x values, negative y values, hypotenuse is always positive, so that'll be positive negative. Now, so you have to do a quick graph, figure out where you are, look at your chart, figure out which angle we're talking about here, which quadrant you're in, and therefore how the signs are going to be affected according to this chart right here, right? And then you have to add them up with a common denominator. That's it for the first part. Okay, I'm going to erase this, and then we can try one more just so you guys understand the concept that we're talking about. Let's try this one. Cosine 570 plus sine of negative 765. Okay, this is the example on the top of page 258 that I'm showing you. So cosine of 570, a quick graph. Well, 570, that's at least 360, so I'm going to subtract 360. That'll give me the angle 210. That's really what we're looking for, cosine of 210. So since it's positive, we're going to go counterclockwise. You go 90, 180, 30 more degrees right here. So this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. We're going to have a negative x value, negative y value, and our hypotenuse is always positive. So we're looking for the cosine of 30 technically, because 210 is the same as 30 degrees in the third quadrant. So the cosine of 30 is radical 3 over 2. But you have cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So the cosine of 210 must be a negative number divided by a positive number. So we know our answer is going to be negative. Since the cosine of 30 is radical 3 over 2, this must be negative radical 3 over 2. Now, sine of 765. Oh my goodness, 765. Well, that's going this way, clockwise, but that's already at least 360. If you do 2 turns, that's 360 plus 360, 720. So I'm going to add 720, and I can clearly see that this is really just negative 45 degrees. So let me do a quick graph. 45 degrees. I know my x value is going to be positive, y value negative, hypotenuse always positive. They want the sine of 45 degrees. Well, the sine, not 45, of negative 45 degrees, negative 45. Since we're in the fourth quadrant, the sine must be the opposite over the hypotenuse. So that's a negative divided by a positive. So I know my answer is going to be negative. So what's the sine of 45? It's radical 2 over 2. So since we're in the fourth quadrant, it must be negative radical 2 over 2. Now we're adding these two together. Negative radical 3 over 2 minus radical 2 over 2. To get they already have a common denominator. Technically, what you can do is just have them both over 2, since they both have the common denominator. So negative radical 3 minus radical 2 all over 2.